When I was a teenager, the pastor of the Methodist Church changed, and my family went church shopping, and we found a small Quaker meeting outside of town, and we joined that meeting. And actually, I signed the letter uh, with my parents.
Sweet.
And so I've been a Quaker for almost 70 years. And that was a life-changing event uh, because I met people that I never would have met before. I joined a religious organization that did not demand, you must believe this, you must believe this, you must believe that, which I found a very good thing. Um, and so the net result was I got involved in organizations that were concerned with anti-war activity. I met a family that had come up from well, 17 miles north of where we were living. There was a small community of people who had a farm, and they farmed the thing jointly, and they had professional lives in New York City. But this family came up to live with them from Koinonia in Georgia. At that time, Koinonia had a little problem with tracer bullets being fired across the property, with a complete boycott of their community. They wouldn't sell anything to it or wouldn't buy anything from it. The situation was that there had been this community started by Clarence Jordan, a Baptist minister, which had been there for, 10 or more years. But as a result of the Supreme Court decision to integrate the public schools, people down there in Georgia didn't like the fact that it was an integrated community. And this one family that had 11 children and a mother and a father, they just couldn't deal with the bullets and everything.
11.
So they moved up to 11 children, yes.
It's an amount of kids.
They moved up to New Jersey to this farm where they helped with the farming. And I got to know them, and I got to know two of the people who were living on the farm other than them, one of whom later became the president of the college I went to. And one day we had Isaiah, the oldest child, who was in 5th grade. He was actually older than that, but he was put in 5th grade. He came down to visit us, and we would normally dress up to go to church, but Isaiah only had one set of clothes. So we didn't dress up for church. We never did after that. We figured there were more important things to do than to wear a suit and tie. And I got to realize the real situation of people who were discriminated against. Some 8 or so years before that, the schools in my community, the elementary school, had been integrated. It had been segregated. This is a school in the north, in Princeton, New Jersey. And the high school had been integrated, but the kindergarten through 8 had not been. As a result of that integration, I got Mrs. Harris for 6th grade math and science. Mrs. Harris was a master teacher. She had a master's degree, which is unusual for all the teachers in that school system. She convinced me in 6th grade that I ought to teach math in college. Okay, that's when I made the decision.
Yeah, that's awesome.
My younger brother, who was 4 years younger than I was, also had Mrs. Harris. And that was when he decided he wanted to get a PhD in chemistry and teach the college level. My sister, who was born in 46, so that's 8 years younger. She had Mrs. Harris. That's when she decided to get a PhD in biology.
Wow.
The youngest child in the family had Mrs. Harris for math and science. And when he was in college, he got a Master of Arts in teaching. 4 people, 4 children in that family, my family, decided that she was the best teacher we ever had. And as a result, all of us, not permanently, 3 of us permanently and 1 of us temporarily, went into teaching.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's the impact of a teacher. Now, because of the problems that there were in Princeton at the time that the integration took place, the Black students didn't have an easy time. But there were lots of very bigoted teachers. But I had grown up in a family that believed in treating people the same, no matter what color they were, no matter what their background was. And when I was in high school, I registered as a conscientious objector and was active in various things dealing with the civil rights campaign at that time. And I went on a special weekend work camp to help people who were living in the poor section of town renovate their apartments. And on that weekend work camp, I met this young lady that I thought was rather nice. And we got married less than a year later. And she was working for the American Friends Service Committee. And I was active in anti-war activities and in race relations activities. We rapidly had 2 children. Not exactly, the first one was not exactly planned, but, and when the second one was an infant, she went back to work 4 days a week, 3 days a week, and I was working 2 days a week. And one of the people that she worked with said, "How are things going with you?" And she said, "Lousy. We don't have a car. We don't have enough money. We don't have, whatever." And so he said, "Well, I know of this house, this museum in Germantown, and they want a caretaker." We applied, we got the job. And so we stayed in a predominantly Black area of town with this historic house. Fast forward several years, and we heard of a program that the American Friends Service Committee had to bring Black children from the South to the North to enable them to get to a decent college. It takes senior year. We called up and they said, "We filled up, we've placed everybody, so, And we said, "Okay, we'll call you next year." Then in the beginning of August, we got a phone call saying, "This is not part of our program, but there's this young lady from Washington, D.C., who she'll be entering her sophomore year. Some people have found her a scholarship at a private school in Philadelphia. We need a family for her to live with." And we said, "Okay, we can do that until a more suitable family is found, like one that doesn't have 2 infants, but has some teenagers." She lived with us for 3 years. She now calls us mom and dad. We learned a lot. And 2 years after she lived with us, 2 years after she came, we adopted our first daughter, who is Black. And she arrived at the age of 5 days. And 3 years later, we adopted another girl, also mixed race, mixed race. So as a result of sort of accidents, we have a family that is, when you count everybody and all the descendants, all of our 13 grandchildren and 4 great grandchildren, we're in the minority of our family. And that changed us, and we never want to change back. We're just happy as anything. Did marvelous things.
I'm glad. That's an awesome story.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, what did, just for my own personal question, it's not on that list there, but what did the civil rights movement look like back then?
Well, that was in 63 is the March on Washington. We spent a summer in Mississippi in 1966 teaching at a predominantly Black school. And it was a different country. And it was the Meredith March. And the final rally for that was in the football field right across from the house where we were living. And that's the one where Stokely Carmichael was saying to Martin Luther King, you need to get up off your what and do something for the Blacks and not this nonviolent crap. Well, unfortunately, we thought the nonviolent crap was a lot better than what other people were suggesting.
Yeah.
But
What's a memory that makes you laugh?
memory that makes me laugh. Oh, when I was growing up, the 6 of us would sit around the dining room table, and one of the interesting desserts was junket pudding. I don't know whether you've ever had that.
No.
It's a thing that sets, and if you cut into it, it becomes more liquid. Not the solid, the semi-solid stuff is still there, but you can see the liquid around.
Okay.
Well, for some reason, some of us children decided that we were going to put our initials in the junket. And my mother said, don't put your initials in the junket. My father said, well, he made something about that. He was going to, I forget what it was, something about he was going to shoot anybody who put their initials in the junket. So all of us did, including my mother, and my father went, ah! Which sort of had everybody laughing. And ever since, the story about the junket has been a funny one in the family. It's only my sister and I who are left, but we still laugh about it. The importance of love and the power of respect.
And do you have like a certain story or time when that was really reinforced to you?
No, it's a possible phrase I'm going to use for this talk I'm giving in June.
Okay.
The other title of this thing is Listening, Learning, Loving, and Laughing, which you might say is an L of a life, but that's probably not going to fly.
I liked that one.
Well, think of the importance of listening and think of how you learn from listening. And then think of the importance of loving and think of the enjoyment you get from loving, and the laughing that you get to do when you really love somebody or some family. It's really neat when we get children and grandchildren together. Uh, it's sort of neat, and it's not that we all agree on everything. I mean, of the 5 children, one has experimented with evangelical churches, and I think she and her husband now go to some sort of an evangelical church. Another family doesn't do any church at all. Another one married a Catholic, and he'll take care of the kindergarten students, but he never goes to mass. Another one married a Jewish woman, and the children are raised Jewish. And another one, she's done all sorts of things. She used to be in a very evangelical church, but when she divorced her husband, she divorced the church as well, which is probably a good thing. But we're all pretty liberal. We don't have any conservatives, although we're not radically liberal. We believe in being fair to people and in treating people the way we want to be treated. There's something about that in the Bible, and that is mostly ignored by certain politicians these days, if I may issue a political statement.
I would thoroughly agree with that political statement. What has made you happiest or felt most fulfilled in your life?
Well, professionally, I taught for many years. I started out teaching mathematics and then moved into teaching computer science and software engineering. But along the way, I taught a course in nonviolent social change. I think the thing that's fulfilled my life the most is the volunteer work I've done. When people ask me to do something, I usually say yes, even if I don't want to do it. So at the present time, I'm president of the Residents Association here. I'm on a fundraising committee for a national organization that is trying to raise $50 million in the next 5 years. I'm chairman of a committee, local committee, that needs to raise $25,000 to $30,000 each year. And we do this with one letter. I've been involved in fundraising for the Residents Association here to upgrade our audiovisual system in the community center. And we're giving a lot of money away. We're lucky we have enough money that we don't need it. We live very modestly. And we would prefer to give the money away rather than to give it to the United States government so that it can buy weapons. We don't think that's the best way for our money to be used.
What do you remember from being young that you will never regret doing or being a part of?
When I was in high school, I took courses in woodworking, in mechanical drawing, 2 years worth, at a time when the courses that I would take normally were exclusively for the bright students, and these classes were classes that the bright students never took. And I never regretted that because I learned a lot. And I also learned that I could make good friends with people who were not my intellectual equal. What a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I have learned from so many people. When we were caretakers of the historic house, the person who was the head of the committee had a butler, jack of all trades, who did all the work for her. He was a person who had been drafted into the Navy during World War II and had retired from the Navy. He was a cook in the Navy because of his color. If he was black, he was a cook. If he was Filipino, he was a steward. Okay, that was the way it worked back then.
That's so crazy to me.
And Parker and I worked together, dealing with the arrangements of things in the historic house, dealing with maintaining the grounds. I did most of the maintaining the grounds, but he helped me. And I learned a whole lot from him. At one point, our boss had said, all those dishes that are in the downstairs kitchen? Yes, and I want them put up in the attic. And I said, we'll get right on it. And a week later, Parker hadn't done anything about it. I hadn't done anything about it. I said to Parker, when are we going to move those dishes up to the attic? He said, don't worry, we'll get to it. Don't worry about it. And a month and a half or so later, boss said, those dishes I asked you to put up in the attic? And Parker said, yes. And well, I want you to bring them down and put them in the kitchen. He said, yes, ma'am, we'll get right on it. And I learned a lot from Parker. Good man. Before we left Philadelphia, he invited us over to his family's house for dinner. And he cooked us standing rib roast. And, you normally test the standing rib roast is done by sticking a meat thermometer in it. Parker cooked it perfectly. He knew when it was done by feeling it. He had skills I did not have. And our older son at that point was about 6 years old. And he was asking, or five, he was asking, why our daughter's skin was different color and why Parker's skin was different color. And our daughter, the one who lived with us, she was 16 when she arrived and we were in our mid-20s. So having a teenage daughter at that age is sort of interesting. She said, well, this is the cross I have to bear. It's the problem I have to deal with every day of my life. And really a lousy answer. Parker said, well, now look, Jonathan, my palm is different color than back of my skin. And I've been all over the world and I've seen people all different colors, light brown, dark brown, yellow. It's amazing. People are all different colors and they're all pretty nice. And after Jonathan had left, I said to Parker, that was a really good answer.
What's the biggest change that's happened over the course of your life? Like on a historical worldview, what do you think made the most difference?
If I was asked 20 or 30 years ago, I would have said the civil rights era had made the most difference. But starting in the 1990s, we went backwards instead of forwards. Right now, the thing that I think is the most difference is climate change, which I think is going to cause many problems in the future. We've already had one experience with a real disaster, the COVID epidemic, where there was a clear way to solve the problem. And that is to give everybody in the world a vaccine. And this country, among others, decided not to spend large amounts of money on what I would call national defense, which is making sure that there are no mutations of the vaccine in countries that have no vaccinations that then come back and bite us badly, which is now happening for the second time. right now I have a pretty pessimistic view of what the future's like. Early on, I felt that there were people who were concerned with improving things, concerned with making the world better, and that even though they weren't fantastically successful, they were having some successes. But what's happening now is a growing trend on the part of many countries to have more authoritarian governments, to say it's worth it to have these people who are going to boss us around. France right now is dickering over whether to elect Marie Le Pen, who is sort of to the right of Genghis Khan, believes that Putin is a good person, sort of like some of the people in this country who talk about how wonderful Putin is. I don't know, it's difficult, but the important thing is that when you are trying to make the world better, you do so because that's what you need to do. One difference that I had with many of the teachers that I saw is that I worked with is that their attitude was that they were teaching so that they could make more people like them. If you are a mathematician, you want more mathematicians in the world. If you're an English teacher, you want more English teachers in the world. And my attitude was that one of me is enough. Maybe we ought to get people who are better able to adapt to change, better able to do things differently in the future than they did in the past. When I was in my mid-30s, I was regularly meeting with prospective students at the liberal arts college where I was teaching, and their parents. And I would say that one of the goals of the school was to make sure that you were able to survive during the next 50 years of your life when you'll be employed. And since a career these days was only 7 years long, you were going to have 7 different careers. And so you had to be able to change careers while working. So your education had to teach you how to learn, how to adapt, how to modify yourself in the middle of your life. And I would say to the parents there, is there anybody here who is still doing the same thing that they did when they graduated from college? And every once in a while, there'd be 1 or 2 people who would reluctantly put up their hand. And I would look at them and I'd say, "Oh, you're a high school teacher, aren't you?" And they always said yes. And I said, "And are you doing the same thing now that you did when you started teaching?" "Oh, no, it's completely different." Point made, And then I would say, now, let me talk about myself. I started out as a pure mathematician, rapidly moved into applied mathematics, rapidly moved into using the computer to teach mathematics, rapidly used into teaching theoretical computer science, spent half a year as the director of HR for the whole college, something I wasn't trained for, on top of my teaching, and then was teaching mainstream computer science. Okay. And I'd only been in the workforce for 15 years at that point. At the same time, my son went off to graduate school. I went off to graduate school as well for the second time, and then moved to a job at a different type of institution, teaching a different subject, computer science and software engineering. At an engineering school, I've been at a liberal arts college. Okay, but all during my life, what I've done is a lot of volunteer work, and that's been pretty important. After I retired, I went out and taught. We were able to teach in Nigeria for a while. I had a Fulbright. Took the whole family over, except for our daughter who'd gone off to college. she'd already been in college. She went to Oberlin, graduated cum laude, and then was working in a telephone company. And we were able to see our first grandchild before we went off to Nigeria.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, not everybody has a grandchild at the age of 35. And so what happened was that I had to make drastic changes in what I was teaching, how I was teaching, where I was teaching. And, all those changes were important. Then after I retired, I was doing accreditation work all over the world. I was doing volunteer work at a Quaker study center in England. We were there for 5 springs for between 3 and 4 months. We were in Hawaii for a whole year, and then we decided we'd go back there for the winters, and we did that for 15 years, which we thought was really marvelous. In the course of all this, I accepted a position as the interim executive director of the ACLU of Indiana, the Indiana affiliate of the American Civil Liberties Union. I'd been on the board of the Illinois ACLU and the Indiana ACLU, and the executive director had to retire for medical reasons, and they needed somebody to fill in until they could hire somebody. And I said, as long as you're doing a job to find somebody, I'll do it fine. But doing all those things and then getting into fundraising, which I'm doing now a lot of. At one point, I was the presiding clerk of the Illinois Yearly Meeting, which is the head honcho, but whatever that means. Doing a lot of things.
Are you glad you did so many things?
Yeah. They were fun. I mean, when the ballasts of some of the electric lights in the main office building started going and burning up, it wasn't actually pleasant. And so, but
In general, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
Great.